Hello, welcome to another video. So today we're going to be talking about the top 5 units that I think that you should have in your Thousand Suns list. So brand new edition, 10th edition is here, and we together are all trying to build lists for our favorite factions. So one of my favorite factions is of course Thousand Suns. So today we're going to be talking and giving you guys a little bit of help on which units you should be taking. So we're going to go over the top 5. So first and foremost, the most important model in your army should be, of course, Magnus. Now, Magnus is one of the most powerful psychers that we have in our army, and the benefits that he brings to the army are very potent. +2 movement is always very strong. It's one of the auras he can take at the start of your command phase. And the other aura he can take is, of course, the buff for himself to make -1 damage. So just those two abilities alone are very strong. You know, your units moving 7 inches instead of 5 is very powerful. The second thing that Magnus brings to the table, other than his devastating damage in the shooting phase and the melee phase, is +1 to hit and +1 to wound with psychic weapons. Now, of course, Magnus also does that aura for himself. So he does give himself +1 to hit and +1 to wound. That's very helpful when sometimes people will hit you with a -1 to hit or anything like that. Magnus is always going to hit on 2s unless you have some way to make a -2 to hit. And like I said, with him being +1 to wound with his own weapons, it makes those weapons very successful in their ability to do damage. So Magnus, number 1. Go to the second unit that I believe is the most potent unit, the most damage dealing unit other than Magnus, is of course Scarab Occult Terminators. I think that every list should start with at least a 10-man unit of Scarab Occult Terminators. This unit has a variety of different abilities that make it very strong. But first and foremost, they have the ability to deep strike, and deep striking is very important in this edition. It allows us to complete secondaries that we would not be able to do normally because of restrictions now with the fly keyword and movements and things like that. Sometimes it gets a little difficult to move around the board, so being able to deep strike in is very powerful. The other thing that makes the deep striking very powerful in this edition is that you cannot move in a phase in which you just deep struck. However, in the next phase, which is the shooting phase, this allows you to spend your Cabal points to basically move this unit again. And what that's good for is if you were wanting to stay out of Overwatch range when you came in, or maybe you wanted to get around a wall that you were basically had to deep strike in front of or on the side of, you couldn't really get the angle that you wanted to cut with that unit. Well, if you had an extra 5 inches of movement, that might help you out a lot. Again, other instances in which this would work is getting you into rapid fire range so that your bolters do as much damage as humanly possible, and maybe get you in range with your psychic abilities that you have. So overall, their movement is very strong and very powerful. Now, obviously, you can't charge after you move again, or you move after you deep struck, but shooting at basically a target that was obscured a moment ago is very powerful. Other than that, they have some very strong abilities with defensive characteristics. So basically, while there is, a psyker leading the unit, which you'll almost always put a Terminator Sorcerer in that unit, you're going to get -1 to wound by any weapons that are higher strength than your toughness. So right there, the durability of that unit is quite strong. Also, your unit basically is going to have a 2+4+. So toughness 5, 3 wounds with a 2+ and a 4+ invul is pretty strong. Now, unfortunately, there's no way to regenerate like there was in the old editions, but I mean, that unit for 410 points is very durable. Now, some other things to factor in with that durability, as well as with Magnus, is the fact that basically you have strats that you can use. You have the Cabal points to basically re-roll a failed save that you might have. You also have the Cabal points to make a stratagem free, which allows you to use the stratagem that when you take damage, you can make that damage become 0, as long as it's not devastating. So those built-in abilities allow a lot of flexibility with that unit as far as how defensible they can be. And if you're in cover or you're obscured by cover, you'll get +1 in your save on top of that, making the unit even more durable, as long as obviously the AP is high enough for you to get your cover save. So overall, this unit puts out the most damage above, below Magnus, basically. Magnus puts out the most damage out of everyone in the army, but the Terminators are a close second. So third of the units that are a must-have is, of course, Ahriman. Now, Ahriman has been a mainstay in Thousand Sons forever. He has been one of the go-to units. Even before Thousand Sons were even a thing, he was still a unit that was taken very often. So now that we have Thousand Sons as a codex, he was taken all of 8th and all of 9th, and now he's going to probably be taking most of 10th unless his rules get rewritten at some point. Why is Ahriman so strong? Well, Ahriman used to have some very powerful psychic abilities, but his main psychic ability in this one is +1 to wound with your weapons. So a blanket +1 to wound with all of the weapons that in the unit that he's leading is super strong. It allows you to take a unit like Flamers and make that unit very reliable in doing its damage. Before, your strength 4 weapon, it's not really that crazy, right? I mean, strength 4, -1, d6 shots, you might not do a lot of damage, and that might be an issue. But with Ahriman, +1 to wound means even if you were wounding the target on 6s, well, you go now to wounding them on 5s. And if you were wounding them on 5s, now you're wounding them on 4s, and so on and so forth, which just makes the damage potential of that unit very powerful. Now, you can take the Flamers, or you can take the Bolters with a 1 Reaper chain cannon, but ultimately, +1 to wound is quite strong. Couple that with some of the abilities, like I said before, where, you can be near Magnus and get +1 to hit and +1 to wound if you make those bolters, psychic bolters with the stratagem, as well as with the Terminators. You can do a whole bunch of damage with them. If you're basically +1 to hit with, spending another stratagem for full rerolls to hit now and full rerolls to wound with the psychic bolters that you have now, that can be very, very potent. So Ahriman is definitely a must-have just with that ability alone. But on top of that, his second ability is that he allows you to make one of your Cabals free once per game. So that's a big deal because some of our Cabals are very expensive. Negating someone's armor saves is 9 Cabal points. So being able to make that 0 on a crucial turn, a turn where you might need to spend your Cabal points somewhere else, like making stratagems free, well, he allows you to do that. So definitely a must-have. So number 4 for me is, of course, allies. So I know this is a little controversial, but with your Thousand Sons, you want to keep them pure, and I get that. However, to play a competitive army of Thousand Sons, I believe that you need to take demonic allies. Now, I'm talking demons here, not Chaos Knights. So for me, demons fulfill a role that the rest of the army just can't do, which is basically fast-moving units, more fast-moving units, and lastly, lone operatives. We do not have lone operatives in the entire Thousand Sons Codex, but your demons for Tzeentch have 2 lone operatives in their roster. So being able to take both those units and add them to your army is a real big benefit. So lone operative allows those units to basically stand in either your home objective or no man's land objective if you move them over there and hold the objective out in the open. As long as a unit doesn't come within 12 inches of them, they're mostly fine. And even if they do that, in like the Changeling's case, they might not even do anything. The Changeling has some good abilities where, picks a unit, makes its -1 to hit. If it rolls, 2 to 5 on that dice, and then on a 6, that unit just can't shoot. On top of the fact that if they even want to target him, they have to take a battle shock test. If they fail it, not only are they battle shocked, they can't do anything with. They can't target him with their ability, with any of their guns or weapons, and that works in the melee phase and the shooting phase. So that's quite powerful. So other units that are good that I have been finding with some success are flamers. Now, flamers, I know, they took a big hit. They lost a lot of their power. However, they're still very cheap, and they're mostly pretty durable. They lost, obviously, 1 point of durability on the shooting side, but on the melee side, they gained some points of durability there. The other stuff with them that's really good is the fact that, well, they can deep strike for free. So that's really nice for us. Again, this game is now, in 10th edition, all about doing those tactical mission cards, or even picking your fixed mission. So if you take something like Behind Enemy Lines, or you draw the card Behind Enemy Lines, you're going to want to be able to get a unit back there. And unfortunately, Thousand Suns are not super quick. Now, for my Terminators, I take the crystal on them to be able to move them around. But if you've already used the crystal, or they're in a position where they need to be and they're not really going to do a lot of damage across the table, you're going to need another unit that's going to be able to do that. And Flamers fulfill that role beautifully. So, and then lastly, for me, I think that one of the most important models in the game is not so much an actual model itself, but an enhancement. And that is the enhancement for being able to use a Cabal more than once in your turn. It is super crucial to us to be able to use some of these Cabals, like making stratagems free, because that allows us to get some real good combos. Because again, we're only really gaining 1 CP per turn. So being able to use a Cabal more than once, very potent. Some of the important stuff is basically re-rolling saves on some of your characters. Magnus is specifically pretty, useful in this aspect, as well as moving a unit and then moving another unit. So if I got an objective that's on, the left-hand side of the field or the right-hand side of the field, and I need to put a unit in each one, well, being able to double move basically, 2 units is important, right? I move them in the movement phase, then I'm going to move them in the shooting phase. That could be the difference between me scoring that secondary and me not doing anything. Same with damage, right? Like, I need to score this objective and I need to do damage. I need to basically move this unit so that it can get an angle to shoot across or shoot over or shoot behind a wall. Well, the only way I'm going to be able to do that is by using the movement one. But wait, I have a tactical card that I have to move this unit into the center of the board. I can't do both. But with this ability, this enhancement, I can, in fact, as long as it's that unit, I can, move these units around the board. So that is super helpful to be able to use this Cabal twice. And those are my top 5 that I believe you need to take in every Thousand Suns list to make it successful competitively. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. We got plenty more videos coming out, but this is the short and sweet version. I have a much longer version on my Patreon where I talk about list building for your Thousand Suns list. So if you like this content, feel free to check out my Patreon. And as always, guys, for the Dark Gods, I'll see you soon.